How's it, guys? This is Dayvy FPL and welcome back to the fantasy. Wait a minute, Euro 2020/2021, whatever you guys want to call it. But in this video, we're going to be talking about the Euro fantasy competition. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this little bit of a break. I think it's been about a 1-week break since the FPL season. So if you guys are a returning subscriber, welcome back. Hopefully you did enjoy the break. If you are a new member, if you guys are new to the channel, I'm Dayvy and we cover all fantasy football related content here. And that's exactly why we're going to be turning our attention to the Euro fantasy competition. So if you guys don't know, tonight is the deadline for those European teams to get their final team selection / squad selections in. So at least now we get a good representation of what players are going to be picked and what players could be starting potentially for the respective countries. So that's why, because of that deadline, I wanted to get this video out for you guys, which is going to be the ultimate guide to the Euro fantasy competition. We're going to be going over firstly the rules of the competition and the differences and variations to FPL if you guys have played that sort of FPL competition before, and then also be giving you guys some tips on how you guys can create your first drafts and things that I would be watching out for. So that's something you're interested in. Sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So quite a big announcement here on the Dayvy FPL channels that I've released a new channel which is going to be called Dayvy FC. And on this channel I will be creating all my Euro fantasy content just because I kind of want to give a good split between my Dayvy FPL channel and this Dayvy FC channel. Also on this channel, this new channel, I will be talking about more general footballing things such as maybe a predictions video for the upcoming Euro competition. And then later on I'll be talking about more Premier League football content. And as I said, just want to kind of get a distinction between my FPL content and then my footballing content. But don't worry, this Dayvy FPL channel won't be going anywhere. I'm simply just going to be putting it on a vacation mode until the new FPL is released. We'll be covering content at an extreme pace as we enter that preseason of FPL. So if you guys, as you can see there, no subscribers, if you guys want to go over, show some love as you always do, go subscribe to that channel, keep it on notifications as I will be posting my first Euro fantasy draft relatively soon. And as I say, thank you for the support, guys, as you always show me, and I'll see you over on my new Dayvy FC channel. So going over a kind of summary of what the Euro fantasy is going to be entailing in terms of your team selection and your kind of squad selection. So you guys, if you have played FPL or if you've played any other kind of UEFA Champions League, a World Cup fantasy, you can maybe skip ahead, but I will be covering some of the basic terms of fantasy and the specific changes from maybe an FPL to a Euro fantasy. So I personally have played the UEFA Champions League fantasy, also have played the 2018 World Cup fantasy, and the majority of the rules are relatively similar to those more international competitions. So if you guys have played FPL, the majority of the rules are the same, but in terms of substitutes, captaincy, transfers, that sort of thing, there are some variations. So as you can see on screen here, I've gone for the standard team selection that you guys are going to be faced when you start with your own Euro fantasy team. How to get to the website is just simply search Euro 2020, go to that website, then go to games, and under games, you're going to be seeing that Euro fantasy kind of web page. Simply just click on that, register, put in your own squad. My kind of recommendation when you do make your team initially is just pick random players and then you can kind of chop and change them as you please closer to the deadline. So on screen here you can see kind of a screenshot of the 4-3-3 formation. The nice thing about the Euro fantasy is that it kind of gives you a selection of the legal formations that you can have. So a 4-3-3, a 3-5-2 are just examples of kind of legal formations that you guys can pick, and you can just hit that button and it gives you all the legal formations and you can simply just select the one that you do please. The majority of the rules are you got 3 forwards, you got 5 midfielders, 5 defenders, and then 2 goalkeepers, which make up a squad of 15. And then on your starting 11, you're going to pick that starting 11 depending on what players you think are going to perform the best. But here's the big difference from an FPL point of view to now a Euro fantasy point of view, is that you can make substitutions between the match days. Throughout my kind of content, I know that Euro fantasy refers to it as a match day, and that's kind of one game week. So for example, match day 1 refers to all the first fixtures for those respective teams in terms of the group stage. But I'm going to be calling it a game week because I don't want to kind of talk about match days within match days, as I think that's going to confuse quite a couple of you guys. So within game week 1, you have quite a few match days. I think it starts on Friday and ends on Tuesday or Wednesday. So about 5 match days within game week 1 that you guys can select. And between those match days, you can actually make substitutions. So what happens in a normal FPL kind of atmosphere is that you pick a starting 11 from the start of the game week, and then only at the end of the game week, automatic substitutions take take place. That still happens within Euro Fantasy, but to get kind of the most out of your team, the most out of your fantasy side, to get the most score as possible, I would recommend using manual substitutions. And what that means is that between a Friday and a Saturday, you can see how the team gets on a Friday, and then before the Saturday fixtures commence, you can actually make substitutions. So what that means is maybe you have a midfielder that plays on the Friday, only gets 2 points, 3 points, and you think someone off your bench can perform better than him. You can bring that player on as long as they haven't played yet. So that's kind of the caveat, is uncertainty is going to be factored into this. It's going to be a risk-reward strategy. So it is a little bit risky taking out a player from your starting 11, bringing someone on the bench, because maybe they actually don't even outperform them. You're kind of banking on the player that you sub in getting the same points, or hopefully getting more, to get that good return on those manual substitutions. But the reason why I'm focusing on this kind of substitution factor and the rule change is that now we kind of shift our focus away from having a really cheap bench. If you guys have followed me on FPL throughout the seasons, I always have a relatively cheap bench to kind of squeeze as much value into that starting 11 as possible. But now, because we can make manual substitutions, I would recommend having a relatively good bench. I wouldn't have the biggest budget in the world. I would still keep it quite cheap, but I would definitely make sure that the players on my bench are going to be in the starting 11 of their respective countries. So that's one thing to just keep in mind, and that's probably the one thing to take away from this, is that now you can make substitutions and you can do them between the match days of a single game week. In terms of the other rules, I would recommend just going onto the Euro Fantasy website to get kind of the basics. I think they do have about a 3-4 minute video there that explains the basics about how you do get a set budget. You can spend it on players, and you can't spend over that budget, for example. And in terms of the other rules, we'll be discussing them in talking points throughout this video. So let's get on and talk about the next talking point. So the next talking point relates to transfers, and the one thing I want to say is that on screen here, I've listed the free transfers that you guys do get before the respective fixture on the left. So you can see there between match days, and by match days I mean game weeks, and this refers to the group stages. So between the game weeks of a group stage, you get 2 free transfers between each game week. So there's 3 fixtures for each side in the group stage. So between all those, you get 2 free transfers, different to FPL where you only get 1 free transfer every game week. And the one thing I also want to mention is that if you do take more transfers besides your free transfers, those are going to cost a -4 hit. Also, something to note, I think I read in the rules that you can only carry 1 free transfer between the game weeks. That's just something that you guys have to recall. So I think most of us will be using the 2 free transfers just because the season is so condensed of the Euros, and we basically want to take advantage of all the free transfers we can get as we look to kind of shift our players on depending on their fixtures. The next thing to note is before the round of 16, that knockout stage, you do get unlimited transfers. So I would really focus on attacking the group stage here, bring in those 1 week punts, those 2 week punts, because before the round of 16 you get basically a free wild card there, unlimited transfers to chop and change your team as much as you like. And then before the quarterfinals you get 3 free transfers, and then before the semis and the finals you get 5. So that's 5 transfers before the semifinals and 5 free transfers before the finals. I just kind of linked those two to reduce the amount of clutter on the screen right now. But the thing to kind of note is once you've made your team for the knockout stages, I would kind of predict on who you think are going to go ahead, because you don't want to kind of make too many free transfers on taking out a triple up of a team that actually has been knocked out. Obviously in football anything can happen, but I would kind of recommend on going on the odds-on favorite throughout the knockout stages to kind of maximize those free transfers, and don't spend too many hits on bringing players in that you don't own. But that's enough about transfers. Let's get on to something a little bit more exciting. And that exciting thing is going to be captaincy. And captaincy works similar to the substitution rule. And what I'm kind of mean about that is that you can actually change your captain between the match days of a game week. So what I'm saying here is, as on screen, I've kind of depicted the first game week. No, I don't think that you guys should be going for a Scotland or Czech Republic captain. I just kind of listed them as an example fixture here. So let's say on Friday for match day 1 of game week 1, you decide to captain an Italian player. That's perfectly fine, relatively good fixture against Turkey, but let's say they don't actually return. Now in Euro Fantasy, instead of kind of sulking because your captain didn't return, you can now change them to a Wales player that plays on that Saturday, and you can continue to do this for the Sunday, the Monday, the Tuesday, and this kind of increases your chance of getting a captaincy return, and maybe actually gives you something to think about if he does return. So let's say say Harry Kane plays Croatia, gets a goal, you've captained him, but now you think to yourself, is a goal enough for a captain? Maybe I should go for a Cristiano Ronaldo against Hungary. Maybe he can perform better. But then you're going to be taking that high risk, high reward strategy, because not only can Ronaldo blank, but he could also get much more points than Harry Kane, and then you're going to be absolutely laughing. So that's just something that you have to keep into consideration for the Euro Fantasy, and it's also going to keep you guys quite active, because now you basically have to chop and change your captain and your players before every single match day of a game week. So every single day you're going to be uploading your new team, your new captain, to try and get as many points as possible. I think it increases the chance of getting a good return, getting a good score for that specific game week, because obviously it increases your probability of getting a captaincy return, for example. And also this is going to be quite interesting when you guys do select those teams. I would heavily focus on getting players from separate groups so that you have a lot of captaincy options to go for from match day to match day of a single game week. So just keep that in mind. This is probably the most important thing to take out of this video, is that the captains can rotate. You can change your captain throughout the game week depending on what they do in that specific match day. Obviously you can't captain a player that's already played because that's just one of those uncertainty things. You got to captain a player that's yet to play for that to actually be active on your team selection. So now going to the final talking point basically of the rules, it's going to be what chips you get in Euro Fantasy. So you basically get 3 chips. I'm kind of including that round of 16 unlimited transfer as an almost wild card, but on top of that you do still get another wild card where you can make unlimited changes that are permanent. And then we have this new thing called a limitless. So the limitless was still here. I think it was also in the Champions League, but definitely in the World Cup 2018 Fantasy. What this does is it gives you an unlimited free hit. What I mean by that is that for one single game week, you don't have any budget at all. You can simply buy whoever you want. You can buy an Mbappe, Harry Kane, all those expensive players, and select them into one single squad. That's going to be quite a nice thing to do. I mean, imagine the score that you can get if you didn't have any single budget and you could select the best players, the best of the best for the Euro Fantasy. I mean, that's going to be an absolutely stellar score, and that's basically what the limitless gives you. It gives you limitless opportunities, we can kind of say that. But the thing you must note, and I'm going to use an example here, if you use the limitless in game week 2 of the group stages, your squad in game week 3 is going to be the same squad that you ended game week 1 with. What I mean by this is that the limitless is only valid for one single game week, and that's why you can only use it for one game week, and then the next game week it will revert to your normal squad, the squad that you used your budget on. So the budget is going to be a restriction again, but for one single game week you can score an absolutely massive score, and it's going to be quite an interesting thing when you guys are going to be using this. I will hopefully create a video on chip strategies, what I think that you guys should be doing, as I think this is going to be quite an interesting thing to do. But the thing with the limitless and the wild card is because the Euros are so condensed, there's not a lot of fixtures. I think kind of the variation of strategies is going to be on quite a minimum standard, and factoring in that wild card in the round of 16, I mean, that only decreases the amount of game weeks that you can actually use these chips in. But we'll be talking about this at a later stage, maybe in a chip strategy video. Also wanted to mention, if there's any questions you guys do have about Euro Fantasy, just drop them in the comments down below. I reply to every comment usually, so yeah, I will come to your question, and I know that I sometimes talk fast, sometimes don't make sense at all, so maybe you can get some clarity in the comments down below, or you can just comment on my upcoming videos on that Dayvy FC channel. So now going on to some tips for making your guys' first drafts. So at this stage of the season, we still got about 2 weeks till that match day 1 of game week 1. So my recommendation for a tip is just going to be to have fun, to make your first draft, and to not worry that much about your final team selection. Over this upcoming week or 2 weeks, we're going to get a lot more clarity on potential starting 11s that these respective countries are going to be having. So what I would do is just simply go for the players that you think are going to do well, and then you can just chop and change it throughout the next 2 weeks, and that should be your first draft. So just have fun with it. Go into Euro Fantasy, learn about the kind of team selection, the different buttons you can press, the different kind of things and variations of how they do the team selection, and that's what my kind of recommendation would be, just to go for it and just to have some fun. The other thing I wanted to note is a little bit of a nice feature on the team selection that you guys can use, is that you can sort your starting 11 and your bench according to the date. So usually we do it according to fixtures so that you guys can see who has the best fixtures in your starting 11 and on your bench. But now with date, it can refer back to that captaincy and that substitution debate that we went over. So basically what this does is that it shows you when the player that you do own, when their fixture is, and this allows you to get captaincy options for every single match day of a game week, and also to get your subs in order so that you can play a player that plays in the first game, but then also bench a player that plays in the last game, so that you manage to substitute them if you still want them in your starting 11 if the rest of your players don't return. So this is one of the features that I would recommend that you guys do look out for, is that date setting on the team selection. I think it's going to be quite useful when you do finalize that starting 11 for your team selection. The final thing, and probably the most important thing to note in this preparation for the Euro 2020/Euro 2021, is going to be the international friendlies. They're going to be friendlies happening tonight, tomorrow, basically every night till match day 1 of game week 1. And why this is important is that it gives us a good sight into that manager's mind on what starting 11 that they're probably going to be playing. I think that Croatia are currently playing as I'm recording this video, so you can kind of go look at their lineup if you're looking for a Croatian player that looks quite good. But this is going to give you a nice indication of probably set starters for those respective countries and players that you should be looking at in that team selection for your own Euro fantasy team. The other thing to note is kind of looking for players that are in good form, maybe players that are playing out of position, maybe a defender that's playing as a midfielder or forward. We sometimes have that in these competitions, these Euro competitions. Sometimes it's more of the lesser known nations that this tends to happen with, and then also the form of the player for their country. One of the examples I think of here is going to be Gini Wijnaldum. He plays for Liverpool as more of a holding kind of a center midfielder, but for the Netherlands he plays as basically an attacker, and that's kind of one thing that you guys have to look out for in these friendlies, is these players that actually are looking quite good for their country. So as long as you look at the international friendlies, I think that you'll be more prepared than probably most Euro fantasy managers, and your team selection hopefully will be a lot better than the others in your mini leagues. So this is basically a wrap up the video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like it if you did, and subscribe if you're new or have not subscribed to the Dayvy FC channel. As I said, I'll be posting all my Euro content over on that channel, so go head over there, show some love to it, get those notifications on so that you won't miss my first draft, which I will be uploading in a couple of days. I'm going to be signing off. It's been Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers, bye.